Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Mark from Solar Games, and today we are going to talk about some data that we have. Again, rumor mills, so just take it with a grain of salt. Data that we have for the Magic 30 sale. What happened? Now, originally I was not going to do this video because I felt usually don't want to deal with rumor numbers, but I also felt like, hey, if the information is out there, especially since the original information is probably harder to find, I wanted to kind of give that information to everyone, so everyone stands at a fair playing field of what is true, what happened, etc. I think that's just fair. So let's kind of start. So again, this is rumored, so just take it with a grain of salt. But apparently there were a global limit of 14,188 units available for sale. This is again divided up between Europe, UK, and US. So in the US, we had 11,896 units limit, and 1,932 sold, and 2,477 attempted at sale. So usually what that means is that, for whatever reason, maybe some units were sold, but the credit card bounced, etc., or had some issues with payments. That's usually where the number would fall short of the attempted. I do find it kind of strange that that number is much, much lower. Like, you had over 500 people who basically just didn't really pay for the product or had some issues with payments. That does seem a little bit weird to me. But again, these numbers, nobody really knows. It's just some guy saying these numbers. But again, just, take it with a grain of salt, make your own decisions is probably my recommendation here. Again, UK, something very similar, but UK is just so funny. They had only 500 or so units for sale, but 24 successes of 50 attempts at sale. And the EU had 1,785, 283 successful sales, 533 attempted sales. So it's really weird because, again, these numbers are very specific. Usually that tells me that it's not fake. But at the same time, because I say that, anyone can make fake information that sounds real. So it's kind of up to you. What does this tell me, though? I mean, in some ways, I guess this confirms everyone's suspicion that it didn't sell out. But realistically, it's just a piece of rumor because we can't really trust it unless I know the source, unless I understand why this person is trustworthy saying these things. I mean, I could write this message and it means nothing. I think what's really going to make a difference, though, is if during the Q4 annual earning call report next year for Hasbro, not only does we see the numbers of what the earning call kind of represents, but also the questions. And this is going to be key, is that on the call, I hope someone does ask the question of like, hey, you had this thing called Magic 30. You were looking to probably make a good chunk of revenue from this product. How did the product do? Did you sell? Did you not sell out? Give us some numbers for that product specifically. It'll be interesting because, again, usually on these investor calls, anyone can ask questions, right? And if a question like this is asked, they kind of have to answer it, right? Now, there is a moderator, so the moderator technically can prevent these questions from just coming in. But I wonder if somebody big enough, right? Like, let's say a Bank of America, Goldman Sachs type of person goes and asks these kind of questions, very specific. Again, they have to do their own report and investigation, right? But if they ask these very specific questions on behalf of their own shareholders, I think could be interesting. And this also brings up another interesting point, which is, again, back in June, for those that are not investors of Hasbro, there was a proxy vote. So there was this kind of like other group who's part of this like activist investment firm that bought a good chunk of Hasbro stock to be able to put themselves onto the proxy vote. What they were asking for is they were asking for one board member of their like investment firm to be on the board and some other like leadership seats. And the whole idea here is they want to basically take Wizards out of the Hasbro reporting line. So it could still be a company that's essentially has, but really just separate Wizards out as a separate company again. This was really interesting. And of course, the idea was rejected by Hasbro, and they did win the proxy fight there. So the activist investors did not win. But given that they lost and the stock over the next 4 or 5 months tanked 40%, that's not a good sign, especially when you look at their competitor, like Mattel is probably the closest one. And you could see that Mattel is doing bad, but they're not doing this bad, right? And that usually tells you that there's a problem. And these board investors, they could be old, they could be, set in their own old ways, but they're not dumb. And when the numbers hit their own bottom line, their shares, they're going to do something about it. So maybe some of those guys are already reaching out to that team. I don't know. But it's just something I think about, right? Like if I was on the board and I really truly believe that Hasbro and Chris Cox and these other guys are doing the right things, but the numbers are just not lining up, I would seek alternative. Here's why. I don't really care if Chris Cox is doing the right thing or not, or I think he's doing the right thing or not. What I care is that he doesn't lose money for me. And if he starts losing a ton of money for me, well, guess what? Better find anyone else. And here's the thing. I mean, look around. Look at Disney. You had Bob Iger leave Disney, right? Retire and say he's never going to go back again. He's not going to do anything anymore. He's going to retire, fully retire, and be done. And of course, the next guy who came in replacing him, by the way, Bob Iger handpicked this guy, Bob Chapek, just screwed it up so hard. He's not a good leader. He doesn't understand where to drive the company. And he screwed it up pretty big to the point where they had to hire the guy back. Now, we could have an argument of whether Bob Iger is the right person. Maybe Bob Iger in some ways set up Chapek to fail. But the reality is, as soon as you start messing with people's money, they could turn on you real quick. So that's all I have to say about that. Again, this is just a piece of rumor. I wouldn't really put too much salt behind it. Let's just wait until see the fourth quarter. But again, all information is information, so I leave it out there for you, and you can make your own decisions. Thanks, and this is Mark, SolarGames. I'll see you later.